Good evening, everybody. We want to welcome you to our Jesus Central webinar. This is our December edition, and we are taking a look at how to start entrepreneurial ventures, whether nonprofit or businesses, and using them to help connect people to Jesus and see the kingdom grow. I'm Travis Guzzi. I'm the Mission Engagement Facilitator here for the Central Region of the Southeastern District, and it's wonderful to have you with us on this webinar. These Jesus Central webinars are really intended to equip you, the priesthood of all believers, to help inspire, empower, equip, and resource you to join Jesus on his mission, to connect with your neighbors, to love and serve them in order to connect him to him and his promises and love. Well, tonight we are joined by a friend of mine. We were college roommates back in the day, and this is Pastor Clint Lutz. He is with Crossway Life and Fitness Center, and it's wonderful having you join us, Clint.
Fantastic, Travis. It's real wonderful to see you tonight. I know we're on opposite ends of the nation here, but isn't it great how we're still so close?
Yeah. You want to tell everybody where you're at? Where are you located?
Yeah, I'm in southern Idaho, Twin Falls, Idaho, to be exact.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, hey, thanks for joining us tonight. So the first question I want to start with, and this is one that I ask everybody that we interview, and it's just basically the question that what has Jesus been stirring in your heart lately?
Right. It's a real great question. And I think, there often are movements and different ways in which God's speaking collectively to the church, but also at the same time, individually to us as leaders, or even to every heart. And I think the way that I've kind of wanted to just look at that and consider that question tonight was just very personally, what's God speaking to me? Because I do see some trends happening across the nation, across church bodies and things like that. But so much of I think the way that God works with us is he comes into our circumstances and he makes himself present, and he tabernacles with us, in other words. And so what that means in my context and where we're at, and we'll get to our story a little bit later, but there's really just been an incredible flurry of work for the last 4 years to get to this place where our mission is today. But now I really feel like God is speaking a new word into my heart and from a leadership perspective, and that word's just been community. And there's an intimacy in that community that I think that God's one of the pictures that actually I came across not long ago, and I've shared this with you actually, is that just God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, this perfect, loving being, God by definition of himself, 3 in 1, is community. God is community, and he's perfect community, and that community being so wonderful and perfect, he said, let us make man in our own image, and I think the idea there is that God is just wants to expand love. He wants to expand this idea of love by creating community and by inviting people into that community. So, like one of theologians throughout the centuries have actually called that the circle dance, this Father, Son, and Holy Spirit relationship with one another. The Greek there, the perikresis, that circle dance, and we've been doing a lot of dancing here, and the kind of the double entendre that is, and we'll get to that later. But part of the dancing is just the busyness of life and ministry, and God is saying, okay, I just feel God saying, okay, don't get so busy that you forget what this is about, that this is about my people. I'm inviting you to create a new community.
That's wonderful. I love that image of community and the Trinity. I heard one time that if God were just one, that would be selfish love. And if God were just 2 persons, that would be exclusive love. And so it takes 3 for that sense of community to really be there.
Oh, yeah. Beautiful. Thanks.
Yeah. So, hey, tell us a little bit about your journey in ministry and how the vision of Crossway came about.
Right, right. Well, I've been a pastor now for 20 years. And in those 20 years, um, there's been always this word that I use to describe a feeling, and I describe it as a holy discontent.
Mm,
Uh, because um, the last 20 years has not been the golden era of Christianity in America. And to And on top of that, those first 17 years for me, that ministry was in California, living in a culture where less than 10% of the population uh, went to church on Sunday morning, have a relationship with Jesus Christ. So that was a very, very challenging mission field and place to do ministry. And so, you know, um, always, it seemed like I was always in these circles where I was the young guy, the young pastor, surrounded by wonderful, wonderful leaders and men who had served in the church 20, 30, 40 years and
mm,
great men of God. But at the same time, they all had the same moan and groan just how difficult ministry is, and how, and what's wrong with people, and
right.
and how do we get the church really clicking on all cylinders like it used to, back in the 50s and 60s, and perhaps even the 70s. And so, that was just sort of always this tension of ministry, recognizing that the ministries in which I was associated with had long since seen their best days. For example, the first parish I served at one point served over 1,000 people, but
Wow.
had only been ministering to about 300 people. And so, they had this cry, this morning cry about themselves, that, what happened to yesteryears, and how do you get back to that stuff? And so my journey sort of begins with that holy discontent. It also begins with like just a heart for missions as well, because right out of seminary, I was trained as a church planter, and I loved church planting concepts. I love concepts of starting new to reach new people, and I have a lot of entrepreneurial tendencies, and I think very creatively, like innovative ideas, and I have a high threshold for risk, um, probably more so than would make most people comfortable, and
Right.
all those things put together, um, really, this tension of what's wrong with ministry, what's wrong with the church, why are all of our churches in decline, and then this opportunity before me. Well, when I get this chance to plant a church someday, I certainly want to take so much of this into consideration, and figure out what this means. What are the needs of people? How do you reach people? How do you reach new people? And 10 years ago, we were talking about how you reached unchurched people. Now we're talking about how do you reach de-churched people, people
Right.
who have never even been to church, not people who have walked away from church. And that's even made this conversation a lot more complicated. But so that journey began with sort of a holy discontent about, just a feeling, if you will, of brokenness in the church, but still a strong, strong recognition that the church is God's chosen instrument to bring salvation to the ends of the world. And so we always come back to, the Jesus says, "Upon this rock I will build my
Mm,
church." And I understand that to mean the confession of Peter when he said, that you are the Christ, you are the Son of God. And so he says, upon that confession, I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not stand against it. So I still see that the church has its role to play. God hasn't given up on his church.
mm.
Uh, we're still that instrument that he desires to use to bring the gospel to the ends of the earth. And what a privilege that is. And so really that the journey began with just thinking, okay, it's time. How do I jump in? How do we reach people? How do we become this new community, this church that God wants us to be?
Awesome. And so The vision that God kind of brought to you in that holy discontent was the vision of Crossway. What is the vision of Crossway, and what's your ministry model to connect with your neighbors, to serve them and bless them in order to try to connect them to Jesus?
Yeah, so let me just paint a picture for anyone listening of what Crossway looks like. Crossway is a is during the week is it looks like a fitness center and a wellness center, but it is a church that has worship services on Sundays and Bible studies and home groups and all kinds of ministries, youth group, etc. as well. So it's sort of this ministry hybrid of helping people holistically, heart, soul, mind, and body. And so from a biblical standpoint, I believe where the Spirit really led me to understand what Crossway was about was, you know, different places in the scripture, but like Mark 12 verses 30 and 31, where Jesus said to love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and all your strength. And so heart, soul, mind, strength, or body, that's I believe that Jesus was saying, hey, that's not just an idiom meaning love me a lot. He's actually giving us, he's explaining to us, I understand the 4 dimensions of your human persona, and you can't compartmentalize me. You can't just have me on Sunday. You can't just have me intellectually. To have a relationship with me is to be all in, and that's what Crossway is about. It's helping people discover that Christ has come to redeem us and to give us life, to help us reach our full redemptive potential. So, you know, in that abundant life, we can serve the Lord with all our heart, you know, our emotions, all our soul. It's a very deep spiritual place. All our mind, you know, we're thinking, intelligent beings, and you know, and then of course, you know, the stewardship of our body, just to take care of these you know, jars of clay nonetheless, but still vessels created to be temples of the Holy Spirit. So
Right.
a holistic ministry is a good way to kind of summarize what Crossway is all about. And in that holistic ministry then is sort of that outreach. It's that place where we're working on having a relationship with our community and the people within our community. So the common thing that you hear in church planting circles or just in churches in general is, you know, people just don't come through the front door of church anymore. You know, and so, you know, how do you create new entry points? And for us, our entry point into people's lives is to tell people, hey, we love you and we want to partner with you holistically to help you be healthy, you know, physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally.
Wonderful. That's great to hear. You know, that whole life discipleship, Jesus carrying through all of us, and all of us being committed to the Lord and His service, and that relationship with Him. You know, I think we as the church, we're really good at helping people grow spiritually in their soul. We're good in engaging minds, but and hearts. I think community is a part of that, but body is definitely something that's left out of the equation of discipleship so many times.
It is, and in fact, we've even, I think subconsciously I knew this, but we've even discovered that because of the vanity in America and just the celebration, perhaps the idolatry of beauty, that in Christian circles, it's there's almost this: we're not allowed to spend time making ourselves look good or exercise because that's in some strange form, a form of vanity, and that's not the case at all. I mean, God definitely wants us to be stewards of these bodies, and so we want to help all people understand that as well.
Awesome. That's cool. So kind of day in and day out around the ministry of Crossway, what does whole life discipleship look like? What kind of things are you doing through the ministry to help engage people, heart, soul, mind, and body?
Yeah, the day begins awfully early here. Our facility opens at 4 a.m. Because there's a lot of people that really dedicate themselves to you know, getting up before the rest of the family's up to take care of themselves. And so our classes here start at 4:45 in the morning. We do a lot of cross training, and cross training is is a great way where we do high intensity interval training, resistance training, different styles of cardio and stuff, but broad in the sense that it's not a very specific thing. It's not just cross fitness, but there is CrossFit styles in that, but kind of little tangent there, sorry. But so the morning begins really early, and I would say one of the best places in which we are, making inroads in people's lives is through our classes, where our instructors, they are Christians, and so they're greeting people with a smile. They're constantly letting people know that they're just glad to see them, encouraging them, and then of course you have your traditional workout. We throw a lot of great Christian upbeat music in there, so it creates a fun Christian environment, but not heavily so to the point where if you're not a Christian, you're like, oh man, this is just kind of weird. This is not for me. I think there's a pretty good balance there. But we do wrap up every class with just a simple blessing, a prayer, blessing people as they go. Sometimes people hang afterwards, have prayer requests for us, and we pray individually with couples. And so the day starts early in the morning. Classes at 4:45, 5:45, 6:45, and then a little bit of just open door, so people in and out who also just come to the fitness center, work out in the fitness floor room on their own. About mid-morning, that's when we really start working with our seniors. Their day begins a little more leisurely. I think maybe we all look to that day somehow, but someday. But so about 10 o'clock, the seniors come rolling in, and we have a great senior ministry. So one of the wonderful things that we've seen is just not how holistic this ministry is, but how multi-generational it is. And that's pretty exciting too.
And normally seniors, you think of sitting in the downstairs of the church, maybe with some coffee, or there's a knitting group or something, but you've got seniors who are actually engaged.
Oh yeah, we got them jumping up and down and waving their arms and lifting weights, and I have to hand it to you. Our seniors are by far one of the most encouraging groups to hang out with. I mean, at first I didn't think so. At first, it was sort of the typical aches and pains and groaning and moaning, but this group of seniors has completely transformed. And then when new people come in, they're just like so welcoming. It's pretty exciting to see. And then throughout the afternoon, we have personal training sessions where people can work with us one-on-one. We can do life coaching sessions with people. The afternoons are slow as far as the health industry and the fitness center works, so that's also some time for us just to get administrative work and buckle down, get some things that we need to on our own. And then ministry really starts clicking and kicking into gear as the evening comes along. About 5 o'clock, the people start getting off work and coming back into the gym. So we have evening classes, spin classes, yoga classes, and then in addition, one of the things we haven't even talked about yet is the ballroom dancing that we do here at Crossway.
That's something that I've been to your ministry, and it is unique to see dance incorporated. And you've got some great dance instructors too. How does all that work, and how did that come about?
Yeah, it certainly wasn't part of the vision, but I'm also just, my theology of what it means to be a pastor is just right out of Ephesians 4:11, that my goal is to equip people for ministry, and so help people recognize what are their gifts and just let them use those gifts to serve God's people. Yeah. And so right out of the gate, to make a long story short, I had a young gal when I lived in California. She worked for me, and she did youth ministry for me, and she was living in Chicago, and she was married, and she was a ballroom dance instructor, and so was her husband, and they'd been in the industry for 6 years, and they were looking to make a change, and so she was updating her resume, and she's like finding out that I've moved to Idaho. What's he doing in Idaho? She discovers my website where I've cast the vision on what Crossway is all about, and God had put on her husband the same vision, the same style of ministry of a health center where he could coach people in fitness ways, but at the same time be a pastor to these people as well. And so my coworker, his name is Chris, and Chris and Samantha, they moved out here. Really just in faith. I said, Chris, I can't promise you a salary. I don't know if this is going to work. We didn't even have a building. We didn't even know if we'd have any doors to open, but in faith, they came out. Samantha was able to land her dream job. So that was just one of God's way of really putting the icing on the top to say, this is where I want you. And so Chris and Samantha help with our Crossway ballroom dancing ministry. And that's actually grown as much, if not more than anything, because what we do is every Monday night at 7:30 p.m. we have what we call social dancing. So you come Monday night, you're going to learn the basic steps to 3 dances. It could be the salsa, the waltz, the tango, the foxtrot, the hustle, East Coast swing. I mean, there's 21 different dances that we'll teach over the course of time, but we just teach you the basic step on a Monday night. And then when you get that down, and then after a while, you're actually wanting more. That's the hook, right? We got you. We run a 6-week group classes, and you register for your intermediate, well, your beginner, your intermediate, or your advanced classes, and that's where you really take dancing to the next level. And so we just captured this community here in Twin Falls. In just the first year alone, we were rated the 3rd best dance studio in Twin Falls, and that was, like I said, that was a year ago, and we've exceeded all the dance studios now. To put this into perspective, so not only do we have 2 professional instructors, but we've raised up a couple of other young students who are they're not quite professionals yet, because to use that term, they're going to be taking some tests to pass some proficiencies soon. But here's what they're doing. They've reached out to our community, and we're partnering with 4 of our high schools and 3 of our junior highs, 7 schools in our community. And we're teaching ballroom dancing to over 300 students per week. And so we're going to them, working in their PE classes, and then we're creating clubs, because they're so excited about it. And these PE classes, they only last for like 6 weeks as well. But then we create clubs in these schools where these kids come to us, and we have an opportunity to continue to build relationships and teach them dance. And man, I get excited about this, because there's so many other things that we get to teach kids when we're working with them. Within ballroom, there's just so many social behaviors and appropriate touch, and not just to mention the relationships you are making with them. So it's been phenomenal to see this take off.
So it sounds like you've had a very huge reach, and I've been to see some of the dance, and it's fun to see. I mean, people get involved and I know you guys have great New Year's parties.
Yeah, we do. This year it's going to be our New Year's Eve ball, because we always do our dance parties on Friday so that people can learn how to party, and then they can go to their actual parties having learned how to dance. So it's going to be a good one. And this last summer, real quick, last summer, the city of Twin Falls had their summer concert series. So every Wednesday night, live music downtown, and we were just blown away, because we didn't really ask people to, but the ballroom dancers who are part of our community, they wore their Crossway ballroom T-shirts, and so downtown dancing, you would see 20 to 30 T-shirts of our church, dancing. They're not necessarily, in fact, most of them are not church members, but that's our ministry being represented, and it's really neat to see the positive influence in our community.
That's awesome. And then on Sunday morning, then, and again, I've been there, I've seen this, you take the spin cycles and you put them in the closet and you're ready for worship, right?
That's right. We just have a multi-purpose center. It does not look like a church whatsoever during the week, but you would be blown away by just how creatively we use the space to make it feel very worshipful. And one of the ways that we did that is just through just through digital arts, rather than most churches have a lot of beautiful, elaborate artistry, tapestry, stained glass, and wood and structures. And that's part of what creates that very worshipful environment. But we do all of ours through digital arts, and so 4 projectors really just covering massive wall space so that we can bring people into an experiential worship setting. We can be worshiping on a mountaintop. We can be worshiping at the beach. We can be worshiping in a cathedral and really kind of create that feeling wherever we want to be. And that's a lot of fun to play with as, like you're doing a message, Jesus Sermon on the Mount. You can take people to the mount or wherever you want to be. So, yeah.
That's awesome. So one thing you had talked about, you had mentioned, and I'd like to just maybe explore a little bit more, is you talked about you provide coaching with people, and how does coaching work in whole life discipleship, helping people love God, heart, soul, mind, and body?
Yeah, fantastic. One of the best ways that it works is people come here because they're recognizing I have a need, and even though we kind of look to most people on the street like a fitness center first, and that need certainly is physical, there's people also are intuitive and smart enough to recognize that, I've been a little depressed lately, I've been a little down, I've been a little lethargic. They recognize that those are physical things that are also affecting them psychologically as well. And so, they bring their needs here, and I tell you, people, when they come to a place looking to grow, looking to get healthy, they share quickly. I mean, oftentimes the very first time you meet them, they're just laying out what their goals are, what their hopes are, what they're looking for, and that doesn't really have anything to do with us being a Christian ministry or anything like that, because that in truth we don't market ourselves in the community as a Christian gym. We just market ourselves as a community gym. So people find out in time, oh, you guys are associated with the ministry. That's interesting, and they'll ask questions about that. But it's not how we lead, and so life coaching and coaching with people here really begins with just asking lots of powerful questions. Just who are you at? What brings you in? What are your goals? And walking alongside people and helping them accomplish their goals. And so, we've got some very, very wonderful ways in which, I, as a certified life coach, and of course you and I have done a lot of that stuff together, Travis. We know that there are some very tangible, very practical ways that you can just, in natural ways, just have easy conversations with people. that it's really taken the burden off of me as a pastor to try to solve somebody's problems, when I can just keep asking questions and say, well, what do you think? What do you think the next step for you would be, or how can I help you with that? And that's what coaching looks like. It's not me trying to diagnose or shrink down their problems. It's not me coming up with solutions. The client does all of that work. I just walk alongside them and help them in that process.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Cool. So you've been at this for what is it now? A year and a half, 2 years?
That's right. Actually, next week is our 2nd anniversary from when our doors opened. I've been at this for 4 years. So literally December 15th in 2015 is when we just, we prayerfully, my wife and I, felt just led by the Holy Spirit to peacefully resign our calls where we were serving in ministry in California. And that was like I said, that's the risk, the factor that I was able to, it's a God thing. I because it's not about me, but at the same time, we didn't have salaries, we didn't have jobs we were coming to. I will say we did have family in this area, so we have a support system that really helped us just cast the vision, get established, and get the doors open. So basically, I was on the ground for about 2 years doing development, casting vision, fundraising, and then got the building up and open doors. And so that's been going now for 2 years.
Awesome. So in that time, I mean, this has really been a 4-year journey for you. What have you been learning about using a business venture? And you guys are organized as a nonprofit, but it's still utilizing a business approach. What have you been learning about that for doing mission work and church planning? And what would you say with that are maybe some of the pros and cons that you've discovered?
Yeah. So the main reason why I wanted to do it is a very positive story to share, and so I'll start with that. The reason why I was looking for just that tangible means to have another way to build relationships, because it's tough to build relationships with people and who and bring them into the church when they're not asking any questions about the church. They're not interested in church, and they're certainly not going to come check you out on Sunday morning. So the idea was to create a side door, if you will, to build those relationships, and that's been very, very effective. I mean, just rough numbers, right? You heard us talk about over 300 students that we're impacting through ballroom dancing. There's about another 100 adults that we impact on a weekly basis through ballroom dancing. And then our fitness center also, we're probably in that 450, 550 client range, where we're working with about 500 people. We don't see all of them a week. That's not what I'm saying, but we do have about 500 clients. And so that's the network, that's the reach, the in-reach to our community that I wanted to create. And so that's the very, very positive. The challenge, of course, is, I'm sure you can hear, we've created a lot of work for ourselves, right? So we have to run a business well. You can't just open up the doors and call yourself a fitness center and expect people to stay if you don't deliver on that, and if you don't continue to deliver on that and truly help people out. So that's a big challenge. You have to run a business, you have to run it well, and that's how you grow. And then on top of that, now you're still a pastor. You're still trying to run a church. And so in truth, if anybody is considering what I've done, I would probably spend about an hour trying to talk you out of it, because it's really like having 2 full-time jobs but getting paid half as much as you used to for your previous job, right? So and so those are some of the challenges, is just the workload, early mornings to late evenings, and so as you grow, you can add more staff, and that has certainly relieved a lot of the stress and the pressure along the way to be able to add staff. But even staffing itself is a difficult challenge, and so you're always looking for people who embrace the vision and see what we're about, because we're not just selling personal training sessions and trying to get rich off of commissions. That's a different style of what the gym is all about. And so when you're interviewing people, you're looking for good Christian people who are going to give their lives away. And so that's some of the greatest challenges, is just the workload. And I think with any church plant, of course, there are some financial pressures, because you really are starting with whatever little support you do have, your startup funding, whether that be grants or support congregations or whatever. But as soon as you begin to grow, you don't have the loyalty, you don't have that giving base of an established congregation. So right away, your growth actually in some ways presents more challenges, because now you have, with a new church, often more consumers than you do givers. And the goal, of course, as you're discipling these people, you're discipling them how to give their lives away, how to give and live sacrificially. But that's not how people come in. They come in consuming and needing, and you give. And so that's a real challenge in and of itself as well. So I don't know if you have any more specific questions about any of that, but
no. Well, let's dive
love the work, but challenging.
Yeah. Well, let's maybe dive in a little bit more on this idea. What would you say are the greatest opportunities for the gospel using this ministry model?
Wow. Yeah. So one of the things that I've really come to love and about this ministry model is just really tapping deeply into the doctrine of vocation, that every person has a calling and has a purpose. And while I'm not necessarily able to help every person have a job here at Crossway, that would be ridiculous. But what I am is I'm a model for people who are business leaders in our community about how you can use your business and still be a successful business, but also use it to build relationships and to build into the kingdom of God. And so for that very reason, for example, I was actually one of the guest speakers of a business leaders retreat where other Christian business leaders invited me and other men to speak about their businesses and how we can leverage these for the kingdom. Now ours is a church, and so that's different than somebody who owns a business and isn't a church. But I think what I'm saying is one of the things going wrong within Christianity, within the church, is we are too compartmentalized. We're segregating too much the sacred and the secular, right? And what I'm saying is the Christian has to blur these lines intentionally more, because it's hanging out in the community where people are, where secular people are, that we can have these sacred conversations. And for many people, like myself as a pastor, I discovered I couldn't have those conversations at the church. People don't come to the church when they're lost. They think that's the last place I'm allowed to go when I'm lost and I'm broken. I got to get my life together first before I could ever be accepted there. So, how do you get outside of those walls and meet people? And I think we have an opportunity to do that as business leaders and entrepreneurs in our communities.
I love that. And that vision of taking what we normally would consider sacred is that 1 hour on Sunday morning or, 2 hours of Bible class, and you extend it over all of life. So
right.
Dancing is sacred. Lifting weights is sacred.
Absolutely.
The coaching and the conversations and running a business, being in the community, it's all holy and it's all sacred.
Yes, and God just wants to come and dwell in our stuff. He wants to live in our lives. He wants to take on our mess, and he wants to redeem it. And that's the scary part of it, because when you let broken people and community come into the structures that we work so hard to make look nice and to shine, things get messy at first, and so you got to trust that God's in control of that process, and he can help. It's actually not our work at all to redeem anybody. That God's going to do all that hard lifting for us.
So maybe also the flip side of that question, not just the greatest opportunities for the gospel, but what would you say are maybe some of the greatest challenges you're facing right now, especially as you start maturing as a ministry?
Right. Well, I would say like one of the challenges, which we're still trying to figure out, is how to multiply. So from the beginning, we've had this vision of not just becoming a church that does ministry this way via health and wellness model, but rather being a model, so that we could become a church planting movement with God's blessing. And so the great challenge though in this church planting movement is there's never been a need as great in the last 40 years as now for church planting in America, because just because we're closing so many churches, and just simply statistically put, the best way to reach new people is with new churches. And yet at the same time, finances and funding and mission dollars are the bleakest. And so it's where's that going to come from, and how do we get a movement? And all of this started when so many of the coffers are dry. And I don't know if you've heard statistics like this, but I've heard it said that within our churches in America that 80% of where all ministry dollars come from, those people where that 80% come from will pass away in the next 10 to 15 years. So that's part of the challenge that we're embracing. So another challenge that I see is one that I would ask your prayers for, because we're actually still in this prototype place as a ministry. Our 501c3 status is still before the IRS. They're still taking a look at what we're doing, and we're praying that God would bless that God would just help that to be approved. So there's certainly precedent for what we're doing. I mean, the YMCA, that old model, for example, was a ministry model, the Young Men's Christian Academy, where the gospel was present in a holistic concept. But we know that that's not what YMCA stand for anymore. But so there's precedent there. But at the same time, we're also living in an era as our government and the separation between church and state becomes more and more complicated, that I think it's going to be a miracle, quite frankly, for this to be approved. And that doesn't concern me, because I believe God's in the business of miracles. But it's going to take a miracle for this mission model to be approved. And we'd invite you to pray with us on that.
Absolutely. Definitely our prayers are with you, and would love to hear updates as kind of that gets approved, or what God does with you from there on.
Thanks.
What would you say, Clint, as you think about now 2 years of running this, how's Jesus been really stretching you?
Yeah, right. Oh my goodness.
And we don't have all night, so just
I would say probably where let me just talk about where he's stretching me right now. So when you are spread thin, and when you're doing a lot, when you're putting in a tremendous amount of hours, that you just don't let the busyness of life distract you from what God has called you to do today. And so it's so important just to begin every day with that mission mindset. Lord, I know you have called me to this grand work, but at the same time, in the midst of that, help me to see the least, the lost, just the simplest of things today, to celebrate beauty, to celebrate people, to not become stressed in the moment, it can be real easy when there's just so much on your plate, to be so wonderful and kind and welcoming to the new person walking through the door, but to not extend that same grace to your staff. And so definitely wanting to just let those challenges and bring those challenges to the Lord every day, to have him shape my heart.
Awesome. So you talked about some of the different groups of people you've been connecting with. You seniors, which kind of was a surprise to you. You're very intentional about reaching out to high school students and youth. What is a story from your experience so far of somebody's life who has been touched and transformed by this missional approach?
Yeah. Instantly, I think of Kayshawn, who is actually on staff now, and just a young man of God. But we were just talking with him yesterday about his journey and kind of reminiscing how far he's come. But Kayshawn, about a year and a half ago, was walking the halls of his high school, and God directed his eyes to look inside a trash can. And inside the trash can, he saw a poster that had been torn off the bulletin board, but was still relevant. It was inviting teens to do some ballroom dancing here at Crossway. And Kayshawn, he's a performing artist. He loves dance. He loves drama. He loves singing. And so this instantly caught his attention. He stuck it in his pocket. He came to Crossway. he checked us out. Now, Kayshawn's story is a beautiful yet complicated story because while Kayshawn has a really loving grandmother that he lives with and a beautiful Christian woman, he lived at that time with his grandmother because well, his dad's in prison, and his mother has abandoned him, and so he's had a very difficult childhood. He's a kid who lives in southern Idaho who is half black and half white. His dad is black, was a basketball player here at the college. His mom white, and you know, southern Idaho probably not known for being one of the most racial friendly places in the world. And so, you know, he's just sort of always had felt like life was against him. But from day one, just says he felt accepted here. I remember at some point where he literally turned to us as staff and he says, "No, thank you for not treating me like I'm black." And I think, you know, when I think about what that meant, because certainly you could see the color of his skin, but for me, he was just a lost child of God, and you could see he was looking for friendship. He was looking for a place of belonging, and the guy had so many talents. It was just so fun to pour yourself into him because he would just take it all in. And so, you know, he just jumped in, and he was a student, and he loved the ballroom dancing. And as we built a relationship with him, we got to invite him to church, and so he would come to church, and it wasn't long before we were discipling him and studying God's word with him. And then on his birthday, on September 4th, 2016, he was baptized into the kingdom of God, and that was really fun because there's a video of this on our website where, you know, Kayshawn is a 6'5", you know, 225-pound guy. I mean, the guy is solid and he's huge. And we did a full immersion baptism at you know, at Shoshone Falls in the lake there. And as he went in, he kept his legs straight and locked, and it was all we could do to not let him take us all completely under with him. And it was such a wonderful celebration that just of what God was doing to this ministry with Kayshawn. And now Kayshawn, he's a singer in our worship team. He's actually one of our junior instructors. He's the guy that's out there bringing ballroom dancing to over 300 students now in our high schools and junior highs. You know, I've shared this with him that I'm planting the seeds that God could be calling him into full-time ministry someday, and I would be honored to help him with that along the way. So. Wow. Just a miraculous story of God taking somebody who just kind of lost and beaten down by the world, and he found a home here.
Yeah, and found that value and that redemptive potential as a child of God. That's an amazing thing. And then to think that, I mean, this is somebody who's now in leadership in your ministry, and who someday could be a pastor. And I think that's, especially in this day in which we're hearing about the shortage of pastors and all that. And, you know, really God's answer is going to come from the mission field.
Yeah. Just remember that actually his testimony was recorded in a podcast with Now Leading, the Northwest District's podcast. So if anyone's ever interested in just that full story, it's in his own words. It's a beautiful story.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that, and definitely be praying for him. So, Clint, we talked about this a little bit, and you've been honest that there definitely been some lessons you've learned. If you were to do this again, what would you do differently?
Try to do it again. What I do differently? Well, that's kind of a weird question, because here's what happened along the way. There sort of became this catchphrase that we would use, that we were an Ephesians 3:20 ministry. Ephesians 3:20 and 21 is this doxology which literally just praises our God, who can do infinitely more than we could ever ask or imagine. And that's literally what Crossway is, because it's so much more than I ever dreamed, asked, or imagined. And so the challenge with that question is knowing what I know now, um, um, that takes away the glory of God, of Him saying, hey, this isn't about you. This isn't about what you've got figured out. It isn't about you being fully prepared. This is about me. I'm the Lord of the harvest, and I'm going to bring to you the resources and the people, and all that it takes to make this happen. So that's a difficult question, because I've learned a lot of things, and you know, for example, I've learned it's taken a lot more financial resources than I had when I opened the doors. And in reality, you might even think that was crazy to do what we did, but God provided along the way, and to Him be the glory. Same with just the people that God has brought to serve in this ministry. You know, one of the also the wonderful things about planting a new church is existing churches have trouble handing the reins over to the new generation. And so it's often the very reason, like, churches, as they get older, they're like, how come young people are leaving the church? And one of the answers to those questions is because you're not handing ministry responsibilities and opportunities to them. And so, you know, like, so again, in answering your question, I would think, well, I would need this director and this director, youth and music and finance and all these different things. I didn't have any of that stuff aligned, but God did. And and oftentimes those were just incredibly gifted people that couldn't find authentic opportunities to serve where they currently were, but a new church plant gave them the freedom, the ability to be creative and to do and to live out the callings that God had put on their hearts. And so it's hard to think that there's some way that you can plan ahead if you were to do it all over again, so that those things would still happen, or that they would even happen in better ways because we were more prepared.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
It's
So
the glory of God.
let me put a twist on the question then for you then. I know
Yeah.
you say you're saying that you're praying for and hoping that you become a church planting movement. If you were to think about launching your next site,
Yeah.
what would you maybe do a little different than you did at your start?
Gotcha. Yeah, gotcha. Um, just from a business model, there's something that we've learned, and it's there's a little bit of insanity in saying, you know, there's one other aspect of business that we would tap into to really see this model take off, and that would be that Crossway would be a church, a wholeness, you know, a fitness center, and a daycare.
Mm.
Um, and you know, just we were kicking around the idea of a daycare when we were planting, when we were dreaming, when we were developing the concept. And the bottom line is we just sort of all agreed, you know, that's too big of a reach. And that's probably the one thing that I would say now we're ready for. Don't know if we were then, but and it doesn't answer your question directly, but that's what we would do differently. We would incorporate a daycare into that, because there's just so many ways to work with moms, stay-home moms, working moms, and dads, of course, too. But by and large, there's a big segment right there that without a daycare, without the ability to take care of kids, it's hard for mom to get away, get her workout in, take the classes that she needs to. So that's probably what we would add, what we do differently.
Awesome. Cool. So last question for you tonight.
Yeah.
If you were to give some advice from somebody who's watching this video, you know, they're thinking, you know, they've had something stirring in their heart for a while of, hey, maybe there's a business idea or a nonprofit they're looking at starting, and using that for missions to be able to connect with their neighbors, to love and serve them, and try to connect people to Jesus. What advice would you give to them?
Yeah. Right off the bat, I would say start sharing that with as many people as you possibly can, because um, there's just so many good things that are going to happen when you have the courage to voice those dreams. One of the things that'll happen is you'll actually discover within yourself whether or not you actually believe that this is a calling God has placed upon you. I believe there's dreams, and then there's visions. Dreams are blurry. Dreams are fanciful. You know, they're not really. It's not reality. But when God calls you to do something, it's a vision, and there's details, and those details usually get hashed out in the sharing process. They get hashed out because you learn to become specific, to what this dream is about, to what this vision is about. People ask questions because they don't quite understand it when you articulate it at first. And so people will ask questions. That helps you hone in on your vision. But probably the most important part of that is people begin jumping on board with you. You know, just like you and I have had opportunity to do, Travis, your coaching models, and just incorporating Called to Be and the other coaching things that we do together is such an important part of Crossway. Those things would have never happened if you didn't share your dreams with me and I didn't share my dreams with you. So you've just got to begin by sharing those with people, and finding people in that sharing then who will join you in prayer about that. And I probably should have said first, don't do anything without talking to your wife about it first. So
Yeah. Happy wife, happy life, right?
That's right.
So she's got to be on the team and ready to go too.
Right. And the other thing I did in that sharing process is I did a lot of listening actually as well. So no matter how innovative you think you are, there's usually somebody who's going before you in one way or another that you can learn from. So I was going to different places where I could hear of different ministry styles and different things going on, and also one of the assurances I got by doing that, by listening to other people's stories, was that hey, God is on the move here. That again, I'm not as innovative as I thought I was. This isn't Clint coming up with some new idea and asking God to bless it. God's actually out there doing this already in other ministries and in the hearts and lives of other people. And that gave me a great sense of assurance, actually. It didn't bum me out at all. It actually made me think, oh, man, that's awesome. God's actually
I'm not as crazy as I think I am, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
That's awesome. Hey, well, brother, thank you for sharing. If people want to reach out to you to find out more about Crossway, maybe even have a chance to talk to you about their idea or get some thoughts, how can they reach out to you?
Yeah, my email is clintLutz@crossway.org. The website is crossway.org, and Crossway is spelled with an X, so Xrossway. Feel free to look me up on Facebook. You'll find me at clint.lutz on Facebook, and I would love to just, once we get connected, we can hand each other phone numbers or things like that, and get to know each other face to face, and really dive in together and help each other. I've been doing this with a number of guys who have some new ministry plant ideas, and it's a lot of fun, and it's neat to see how God is moving.
That's awesome. Hey, well, I just really want to thank you for taking the time tonight to share the story of Crossway and your journey in ministry and how God's working in all of that. And please know you are in our prayers. I encourage anybody who watches, please keep Clint and Crossway in your prayer. And thank you for viewing this Jesus Central webinar. This is part of our Southeastern District's iNeighborhood initiative. Really, it's about connecting with our neighbors in order to connect people to Jesus. And if there's a way that I could maybe come along and be a resource to you, do some coaching, or try to connect you to people, please reach out to me at tguzzi@se.lcms.org. And as always, remember to keep Jesus central. Thank you and have a great night.